Welcome to Black Men Screaming. I'm your host, Maurice Carver, and I'm joined by three brilliant and gifted men who will guide us in this conversation about issues that are pressing not only in the Black community, but are pressing around the world. I'd like them to introduce themselves and the organization they're from, starting for Brother Charles.
Good evening. My name is Charles Orrett, and I'm from Positive Expectation.
Brother Brandon.
I'm Brandon Jones, and I run the Jenga Institute.
Brother Zach.
Zachery Williams, me fi me.
Yes, I like that, my brother, and I want to start off with something that really was pressing on my mind, and I was thinking about this, and I want to quote somebody. You might not know who this is. I'm going to kind of paraphrase this because I'm going to change his words into something that I find interesting. We have set out on the quest for true humanity, and somewhere on the horizon we can see that glittering prize. Let us march forth with courage and determination, drawing strength from our common plight and our brotherhood. In time, we shall be in a position to bestow on ourselves and the world the greatest possible gift, a more human face. And so, again, I paraphrase that from another person that I have tremendous respect for, and that was Stephen Biko. He was talking about South Africa, and I'm talking about us as existing within this context of what we call America and existing within the world. There's like an issue that I see going around that we're arguing with individuals trying to prove our humanity, our existence within this world, that it has validity. And then, so there's two questions that come up out of this particular conversation. And I want to touch base on, before we get into the articles, I want to touch base on this because I was thinking about something, and Brother Charles, I'm sure you remember Lerone Bennett Jr., and I know Zach does because he was involved with the Institute of the Black World. And I think that you might even know him, Brandon, because you, with your conscious process that you have. Mm-hmm. Lerone Bennett had this book, The Challenge of Blackness. And then Brother Charles, you probably remember that. If you don't remember who Lerone Bennett was, he was the editor for the Jet magazine. He was the editor for Ebony. Not you, Brother Charles. I'm talking to the audience now. The audience might not know. So I'm bringing them in. I'm bringing them up to date on what I'm talking about. But the thing that I thought was interesting and what's so powerful about the Institute of the Black World, this is supposed to be a conversation between activists, between political thinkers, intellectuals and things of that nature to move Black people forward. And the question is, what is next? And so when we asked that question, someone raised this particular question also. They asked the question, where's the war on racism begin? When does it begin? And let's touch base on this issue of the challenge of Blackness. And this is the last statement I'll make, and then I will let you gentlemen respond. I think this is important because when we deal with the issue of the challenge of Blackness, we have to understand that it's not by accident that we exist in the world the way we are. Again, I'm going to quote Stephen Biko, who said, by seeking to run away from themselves and emulate the white man, Blacks are insulting the intelligence of whoever created them Black. And so, Charles, I want to kind of start with you in this idea of the challenge of Blackness, and what do you think about some of the things that you're seeing within our society, especially within what has been deemed Black culture?
Okay, that's a heavy lift right there, but I'll chip away at it. That I think that our challenge is the way that our ancestors were brought over here, number one, because we are a unique ethnic group in America in that every other ethnic group that came to America, they were oppressed and came here and became free. We are the only ethnic group that came here that were free and came here and became oppressed. And generation after generation have been traumatized by the pathology of the people that brought us over here. So our challenge, for me, I concur with what Stephen Biko said. And in regards to what our challenge is, I think is to heal from the wounds that our ancestors as well as us have incurred since we've been in this experience, this so-called experiment of democracy in America. So the challenge is that because as I think it was Langston Hughes said that the Negro was invented in America, that we have to get back to our true and authentic selves, right? Because one of my main peeves is that going to a historically Black college, that the fraternities and the sororities are all Greek, so what we call ourselves like Black Greeks or something like that. And with that being so-called talented 10th of, that's developing the leadership of Africans in direction, because our identity is tied to Greece rather than to Egypt, Kemet, or Africa, because we're trying to, as what Stephen Biko said, we're trying to be them, right? That's just using one example. So I would say, just to begin in this, unpacking this, that our main challenge is to heal and to focus on our true and authentic selves as Africans in America, and not people that were kidnapped, captured, and brought over here, and trying to heal and get back to our true and authentic self.
Brother
so
Brandon,
I think that's what our main challenge is.
Brother Brandon, would like to respond?
I thought you were going to pass it to Brother Williams because he said Greek.
Well, Brother Williams, go ahead.
Brother Williams is a Greek, right? So, I thought he might have a more direct
No, you mention your name first, so go right ahead.
Well, look, this is okay. So this is what we'll do, right? Since nobody don't want to touch it, I'll take the ball.
I'll touch it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not afraid. I agree with some points, but I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is even though we have adapted, well, let me back up. I think that Black culture has been a response to white supremacy this entire time. And I think that in this response, we've also had a degradation of our culture. If we're honest about where our culture is today, it's a lot of unhealthy things from a spiritual standpoint, physical and mental health and emotional health standpoint. And what Black culture is packaged as, and what we have accepted on many different levels, has been a lot of non-constructive behavior. And I think that one of the things that we have to be honest about today, and when we ask the question, what is Black culture, we have to ask, is Black culture working? And one of the responses that we often get is, well, we're not a monolith. That may be true, but when it comes to responding to white supremacy and racism, that is the thread. That's the silver lining that threads us all together. And at the end of the day, that response to white supremacy hasn't been the most constructive. We can attempt to connect back to the continent of Africa. It's a big place, a lot of different people. Do the people of Africa connect back to us when they get here, or back when they're on the continent? We can go back to Kemet. That's a long time ago. I think we need to stay right where we're at and deal with some of the concepts and issues that we have today. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the folks. I'm very familiar with the understanding, as you stated earlier. I've had my stint in the conscious community, but one of the things I have to always say is, where are we at today? Because our children don't have time to wait for us to have a history lesson on what has been, when we need to be focused on where we're headed. So that'd be my response for the moment.
And I would add to what brothers Brandon and Baba Orrett said, that our biggest battle, we're like a counselor and a therapist for America. And we are helping to continue to remind America of its amnesia and what it really is. But, as my fraternity brother, Robin Kelly, who's written a lot about, your mama's dysfunctional, and in terms of the culture wars and, scholarship on Black freedom. Black history vision is global. It's always been global. So when we're talking about Kim, when we're talking about Nubia, that's Black history. And even when we talk about the migration of people to Europe and Asia and other places, it all, of course, originates in Africa, but it all connects, through all of that. So everything has to continue to tie into that, but we also have to continue to, diagnose and help, show, our country politically, socially, culturally, and every other way, not only the error of its ways, but, who it really is. And that, again, that gets back to Biko. It gets back to what we were talking about earlier, the challenge of Blackness Institute, the Black world consciousness. Who do we, not only who we say we are, who do we believe ourselves to be? Because everything about who we are as a country, politically, socially, culturally, is wrapped up in, how we perceive ourselves. And then how we then, in every other area, how we express that. How we, the identification is the expression. I was watching this documentary on this political thinker, Lee Atwater in South Carolina. I mean, of course, I come from the state of South Carolina. What I was fascinated about was what went into the making of that person. And to me, as a historian and a scholar, that's what interests me. I'm a builder. I appreciate the work of carpenters and how carpenters connect with architects and engineers to help construct stuff and then deconstruct, build up and tear down. Tear it apart and then rebuild it again. So, I mean, I'm interested in what goes into the mind. I mean, and I think America's continues to be in denial. What's happening, of course, in the Middle East and other parts of the world. It's a global history lesson, which gets back to Robin Kelly, which is fascinating. That work is essential because any other action that comes as a result of whatever comes based on what we perceive and think of ourselves. So perception and consciousness is key. But at the same time, we have to deal with the double and triple consciousness that deals with W.E.B., that deals with Angela Davis, and so then we start talking about the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration. Well, why do we, have such a, not only proliferation of people, in those places, but why do we have the attitudes we have about that as being so essential when the evidence and the information, is to the contrary about how toxic and horrific and barbaric it is. And so to me, I'm fascinated about that. And so that's how I'll begin comments, here in the sense of, how do we, continue to bombard America and the world with images? When you were talking what's happening with regard to African Caribbean nations calling for reparations and even in the climate justice people in the COP28 talks, people talk about, loss and damage, but the better term is, climate reparations, and then, coming up with what, 700 some million, but the real total is 400 billion that's needed. In terms of, and take back to think about, and the last thing I say is the New York Negro College Fund. Every year we have that, tallying up that, that number so we can keep our institutions afloat. But the truth of the matter is that America's wealth, of course, would not be what it would, what it is unless there was the labor, unrequired labor of us. So it's like, these narratives about us being lazy, these narratives about us, not being profitable, it's BS, it's bogus. But how do we not only, get people to the point to where they move from consciousness to conscious action? And that to me, we need to have an overindulgence of information to where it gets into our bloodstream, our system, to the point where we can't help but to act in accordance with the way we think. So that to me, that takes back to
let me interrupt you, brother, there, because I know you're a professor, but and I know you just gave us a dissertation, my brother. I just want to
Baptist preacher too.
Yeah, I know you are. I know
that latter point. Which,
I know you are, my brother, and I respect you for that. So the reason why I'm bringing up these particular questions, as we are dealing with issues that are impacting on local levels and on national levels, but you have several articles that I sent you that where Black people rallied around when we saw what happened with the riverboat captain, and now he's still being charged. And we're asking the question, isn't he the victim? Why is he not being seen as a victim in this particular situation? We're looking at a situation where the case that I sent you dealing with Supreme Court, dealing with voting and the whole idea, the issue with Khalif Browder, that case where the brother was locked up and he was incarcerated for 3 months. You see, this is you see where I'm going. this fight to consistently be defined as human. But I think that one of the things that Brandon and me share is we talk about it, that we need to see ourselves as human. That when we look at each other, that we have to see the value within ourselves. There's things within our community that we have to we have to hold ourselves accountable. I think that those things are important. We talk about what the everyone else is doing, but I'm concerned about what we're doing. See, that's why I included the situation with the situation dealing with 69 years, because we're celebrating 68 years for the Montgomery bus boycott, right? But people don't realize that was based off of the Baton Rouge bus boycott that happened a couple of years before that. And guess what? That was based off of the 100 years before that in 1867 in the New Orleans bus boycott. And that is based off of, and actually what happened within that situation, several other cities, including Philadelphia, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but like several of the black cities helped to get the bus lines desegregated in a sense. But that was based off of 1854 with Elizabeth Jennings in New York City and stuff. So what I'm saying to you is that we have an authentic self. We don't recognize it because those strengths are not lauded in our community. We're in the process of being I think of de-evolution. This is the fight that me and Brandon have been having a conversation on this show for the longest time. The negative things that we praise. We don't look at the foundation that we come from. Okay, I'm gonna, and I think that we've lost something. So I'm gonna get a little philosophical on you, brothers, because y'all are all smarter than me. But I'm gonna drop some wisdom to you tonight. We're gonna get down to this issue. What is the thing that I feel is missing today? You know, do you remember when you used to see people stand up in the pulpit and they put their finger up and they two fingers up and they give you the victory sign, right? Like we won, right? You get the victory sign. But see, the problem that I have today is this. I think that we've lost what I call viscosity. Excuse me, I got the word wrong out of my mouth. Do people know what viscosity means? Viscosity is a measure of resistance to deformation. When you have a solid base, then then you have this resistance. We don't have any friction any longer. There's no pushback against negative behavior within our community. There's no friction force. There's nobody speaking up and challenging that. That's part of what Brandon's conversation has been, challenging us to be better because we have a foundation to be great. Do you know what they call people that have zero viscosity? Ideal. You have no resistance, so you are able to be conformed to something.
Right. Aloof is another term.
And this is my last point, Brandon, then you can go, right? Because I'm getting into the scientific aspect of it. So we talk about F is equal to MA. I came up with my own formula, and I thought about Charles because I thought about a lot of the things that Charles has shared me over the phone. He talked about this, and so Zach has talked about this in his think tank. F is equal to MA, but I changed it around. I made it to be BF is equal to MA. And you know what BF stands for? Come on, y'all. Black family is equal to multi-generational awareness. Black family is equal to multi-generational awareness. And it doesn't have to be black family by blood, because I'm not related to Elizabeth Jennings, but I'm proud of the struggle. I wasn't related to Rosa Parks. I wasn't related to Sarah Mae Fleming, who was before Rosa Parks. But we all share the same struggle and fight. So now I'm going to shut up, Brandon. Go ahead, my brother.
No, with the with that term that you introduce, viscosity, I think another term comes with that as well, is fortitude. And I think we talk historically about the fortitude of our ancestors, their ability to stand up and resist. And then I beg to ask the question, how did that morph into what we see today? I don't think it's the same level of approach to this resistance. Now, the interesting thing when you sent over the articles and the Sarah Mae Fleming article, one thing I realized right away from the two images they posted was how much grace she had. I mean, she was dressed nice. She had pearls on. Then there was another image with her and 3 other people. and they just looked so dignified, but they had fortitude though. They were standing up. They weren't being pushed over. They were there to make sure that their voices were heard and that they were taking a stand, and they were doing everything they needed to do to reconstruct how the public transportation system was happening and how that racism was affecting Black folks. And when I look at us today, we're not fighting that same type of fight. And then we claim that we're dealing with worse racism than they did. And it's like, I can't get down with that. And I think when you talk about family, that's where a lot of it starts, is a lot of the revolution does start in the home. And we do have to reconstruct our family structures to have better community outcomes and better outcomes in general. And when I look at the current condition, and this is why I keep saying we need to focus on today and where we're headed, because our children don't have time to wait. Our children are seeking, the babies are telling us right now that they don't care. I mean, they're using much more vulgar language and much more vulgar activity. You know, earlier we talked about conscious activity, and I see a lot of unconscious activity. When we look at the shootings, when we look at the mass thefts that are going on, when we have young people literally turning over cities at night, and they're doing these massive, just wreckage of all types of cities all throughout the United States, we have to do something different in our community so that when our children believe back in us, because right now I don't think that they believe in us as leaders or adults or anything that we're saying, because they're just like, we're going to wreak havoc and do whatever we want. I'll pause right there.
Wow, that's a big one. I'm telling you, it's trying to unpack that. I mean, that's gigantic and dense, right? And I just want to add on to the word that you used, Brother Brandon, is like resilience, because, I think that is a double-edged sword, in that the fact that our ancestors were able to survive through all of that trauma. And it's so many levels to that, right? Because just the point that you brought up in terms of, how the sister was dressed with the pearls and everything, I used to wonder, I'm like, like old folks when I was growing up, they used to like wear shirts and ties and jackets and all that. And not to say that they don't have to necessarily be, like the best dressed, but they still maintain themselves, right? And I was like, well, why you ain't going nowhere, so why you got all of that on, right? And what I kind of like broke it down to is that was them being themselves, right? So it's not like them being in the condition that they're in, right? It's like, well, you're not going to make me look like something else, right? Because even when you look at the marches and everything way back when, well, not way back when, but when you look at the marches, everybody had suits and ties on. You know what I mean? They weren't out there, like sneakers and jeans and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, well, why? And I think that comes through in terms of them reflecting their better selves, in terms of that's who they thought they were, right? That is the strength that we have, because again, saying that that the trauma that our ancestors and even us that we're going through is still that double-edged sword. That even though we have that resilience, but what do we become because we withstood all of those traumas, right? And that's where I go in terms of like talking about healing, because the body keeps the score. And it's going back to even the points that you made in terms of the consciousness and unconsciousness. The consciousness is like, if you look the metaphor of an iceberg, right? The consciousness is the top of the iceberg, right? But the unconscious is underneath the water, right? And it's not seen by people. It's not seen, right? And I think it goes to what we've been talking about earlier, in that we're trying to prove that we're human, right? And we don't have to do that, right? But we're trying to prove that to somebody else. But if we begin understanding more of our story in terms of what our people have gone through and why we have gone through the things that we have gone through, ancestors and all, that the pathology that was put upon us, that pathology and the trauma, that is what we have to unpack. Because when we understand the true story, that's when we understand how powerful we are. But because we don't understand our true story, we thinking about some, the things that we were fed in school. right? In terms of, like Columbus discovered America and all these myths of like white supremacy. So listen, I mean, this is such a big thing to unpack. I'm like going all over the place. I'm sorry, I'm not like focused, but it's so big in terms of having to pull us together, in terms of us being, like you was talking about, that consciousness, in terms of being able to focus and pull ourselves out of this hole that we find ourselves, that we didn't necessarily dig for ourselves, right? That was dug for us and we were pushed in. So I'll end it there because it's really so dense to try to unpack, right? But I think, again, it's the resilience that our ancestors have showed that got us to this point, and we have to like heal from what that epigenetic quality that was pushed, or the genetic memory that we have today, that the trauma has been, that ends up right here. And I think that goes to your point, Brandon, in terms of the trauma that was passed down generation is the part of the unconscious that we're not aware of. We're always going to be the victim, buddy. I mean, focusing on the, in terms of trying to heal ourselves, is focused on other folks rather than focused on ourselves. So I'll, just pass it along.
To piggyback on those comments, to me, two things come to mind. One, the whole notion of, the whole idea of family reunions, and how that doesn't seem to even be something that we, participate in much anymore. The gatherings, the togetherness, and how that parallels what Charles Blow's been talking about in terms of people returning to the South, and connecting between the two. It's like, we have to be together, be around one another, and be able to work through that stuff together. I mean, we didn't have, resources or funds or dollars for counselors and stuff, and, all those, drug stuff. I mean, to be able to, to forget stuff. I mean, people might, indulge in, in whatever, products in order to try to forget, or at least to try to get to a state of consciousness to where we could, not have to, be bombarded with all that other, mess, to where we could, have a more of a clean slate and state of mind. But, at least when we're around one another and around food and folkways, we can be ourselves and not have to pander to other people. We could get back to a better sense of ourselves. And I'm not necessarily talking about, those that, were family reunions that we would have on cruises, but people just traveling physically back to land. And so now we're now coming to see that our ancestral land in different parts of the country, west, north, east, and south, we're making efforts to retain that land, get that land back, which has been ours. And we know with America, the biggest and most important, other than capital, and capital's tied to land, is land. And one of the things I remember that Brother Hockey talked about was that the one thing we can never reproduce is land. And everything's tied to our land. Even the idea, notion of America itself is tied to a land mass. And so, to me, it's like, where do we fit? Where is home? And, where can we, be that we can feel our best selves? And oftentimes we've been on the run for so long. And oftentimes land has been so something that we've been running away from, and transitioning away through. And oftentimes our cars have been the best conduit, in terms of a space and a place, but it's mobile, even before mobile phones. And so, we oftentimes our best way of getting around was on foot. We were fleeing folk or running to or away from stuff. So it's, but we have to continue to work on getting together and working through, the processes and the trauma and the mess that we have faced. And to me, some of the most brilliant people, some of the, like Jordan Peele and others who do the work with, horror and take all that stuff, the history, the culture, and all that stuff, and bring it back to our understanding and our memory, and for us to confront that and to face that and to work our way through it. There was another person talked about obstacle is the way. And, when you talk about in slavery, Harriet Tubman or whatever other figures, there was the totality of slavery that affected every aspect of our lives, our relationships. I mean, brilliant sister that I adore a lot, Diane Stewart, talks about America's assault on African American marriage and how that's been a policy and law. So when people talk about, well, why aren't Black families together? Tell the families, whatever institute, whatever group, to go somewhere and shut up, because we know full well why our institutions, family and community and all have been disrupted. I mean, the residential segregation, we connect the dots, and most people know it. It's in books written by people who have every color and complexion under and over the sun. But the question is, what do we do with that information? And we're tied. Part of the offset, I hear what you're saying, Brother Charles and Brother Brandon, of resilience is fatigue. We're, even with Fannie Lou Hamer, we're sick and tired. It's exhausting. It takes a toll on us to continue to fight every day.